They called him the untouchable CEO, a man known more for restraint than romance. But one stormy night in his private jet shattered that reputation forever and left her carrying not one, but four of his children. Welcome to Beyond Color Stories. I'm your narrator, James, and I'm truly honored to have you with me. Wherever you are listening from, thank you. I genuinely hope your heart is light, your soul at peace, and that love finds you even in the smallest moments. Before we begin, I'd love to know something. Where are you tuning in from? Drop it in the comments. It means so much to me to know how many of you have been part of this emotional journey. If these stories have ever stirred something in you, brought tears, made you laugh, helped you believe in love again, please share this one. Invite someone else into the magic. And don't forget to hit like. It truly supports this growing family of heartfelt storytelling. From me to you, I send this prayer. May love find you every day. May peace cradle your nights. And may your dreams carry you to places where your soul dances freely. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Not just for the stories, but to be part of this safe space where vulnerability meets beauty and every tale speaks to the heart. Now, get comfortable. You're about to experience something unforgettable. Above Manhattan's glittering skyline, atop the soaring glass palace known as Callum Tower, he ruled with silence and steel. Behind a massive black walnut desk imported from the Andes sat a man more myth than mortal. Callum Blackwell, the CEO, whose name alone made competitors squirm and whose mere presence commanded reverence, was an empire in human form. His wealth crossed oceans, his intellect sliced through negotiations like razors, and his demeanor, calm and lethal, was legend. Towering at 6 feet 2 inches, his broad shoulders wore custom Italian suits as though they'd been sculpted for him alone, a jawline like marble, jet black hair, always immaculate. He was the embodiment of masculine control. But his allure wasn't just surface level, it was mystery. For all his charm and power, no woman had ever laid claim to him. His abstinence was the stuff of whispers, a puzzle that tormented the powerful and seduced the curious. Some said he was celibate by choice, others that his discipline was unmatched. But not one soul had cracked the fortress around his heart. That is, until her. Riley Monroe wasn't just another assistant. She was a silent force, beauty wrapped in poise, with skin that shimmered like burnished gold, and hair styled in regal, braided artistry that caught the light like woven copper. Her presence moved like poetry down the corridors of Blackwell Enterprises. Tailored pencil skirts hugged her gracefully, silk blouses whispered elegance. But it was her eyes, almond-shaped, framed with lashes that curved like calligraphy, that captivated. They held storms and stories, wisdom and fire. For 2 years she'd remained impeccable, early, efficient, invisible. She didn't seek attention or favors, didn't flirt, didn't falter. And yet she had the rarest thing of all from Callum Blackwell. His notice. His gaze, though infrequent, would sometimes linger. Not inappropriately, but with a weight, a quiet hunger, as though he saw something he wasn't ready to acknowledge. He'd call her Riley now, not Miss Monroe, when no one else was listening. She never entertained fantasy, never mistook glances for promises, but she felt the shift. It was in the air between them, charged, aching, like thunder before a storm. That night, everything changed. Callum had flown in from Dubai after a tense merger meeting. The office was buzzing. Riley, ever diligent, stayed behind to prep reports. Outside, rain lashed the windows. The wind howled. She received a message, urgent. A document needed Callum's signature. He was at his private airstrip. Without question, she grabbed the folder, wrapped herself in her long beige coat, and slipped into the night. She had no idea she was walking into destiny. At the private hangar, security ushered her straight through. The jet, his sanctuary in the sky, stood gleaming in the rain. She climbed the stairs, clutching the folder, heels clicking in the storm. The cabin glowed with warm, understated luxury, leather, wood, and Callum's signature scent. But it seemed empty. "Mr. Blackwell?" she called softly. No answer. She stepped forward to leave the file, And then the door behind her whispered open. There he was, shirt undone, tie loose, chest sculpted and shadowed by the cabin light, his eyes steel gray and molten, locked onto her like she was the first woman he'd ever truly seen. "You came," he said, voice softer than silk, edged with something vulnerable. She couldn't speak. The air changed. She hadn't come to seduce him, but suddenly seduction had nothing to do with it. It was gravity. The hum of the engines echoed the quiet tension. Riley's heartbeat was a war drum in her ears. This wasn't routine. This was a crossroads. Her breath caught, fingers tight on the folder as she turned to speak. "I didn't mean to," she began, but the hiss of the jet doors sealing behind her cut through her words. Her heart stopped. "Why are we?" she asked, stepping back. A moment later, the pilot strolled past, smiling. "All set for takeoff, sir. Wheels up in 3. Her eyes widened. I wasn't supposed to stay. I only came to deliver these." She lifted the file like a shield, like it could pull her back to reason. But the warmth of the cabin, the silence, the man before her, it made everything else dissolve. Callum took one step, then another, towering but unthreatening. His gaze swept down her body, not lewd but lingering. She felt his eyes on the silk blouse clinging to her, the arch of her waist, the sheen of her hair. And he saw her, not as staff, but as a woman. "Fate has better timing than either of us," he murmured, his mouth tilting into something dangerous, almost amused. Her breath hitched. That smile, it was real. Not corporate, not rehearsed. Real. "I'll have the jet turned back once we're cruising," he said. But there was no urgency, as if being alone with her at 30,000 feet was exactly what he wanted. Riley nodded, heartbeat riotous. She moved to sit on the cream leather seat, fingers brushing the polished wood. She realized she was trembling. Callum saw it. He noticed everything. He sat beside her, not across, not distantly, beside, close. Warmth rolled off him in quiet waves. The only sound was the jet lifting into velvet sky. She watched the city fall away beneath them, stars replacing skyscrapers. Beside her sat a man the world believed to be emotionless, but she could feel him unraveling. When the seatbelt light dimmed, he rose and poured 2 drinks. Golden liquid glinted in the glass. "Drink?" he asked, voice rich, low. She nodded. Their fingers brushed as he handed her the tumbler. A spark lit up her spine. She sipped, the warmth anchoring her. "You're different outside the office," she whispered before she could help it. His lips curved. "Am I?" She nodded. "Less untouchable." A beat passed. Then he turned, face serious, voice velvet. "What if I told you the man you know is a performance? That I've been waiting for the right reason to stop pretending?" Her breath stilled. "I'd say I never thought I'd be that reason." He leaned in, eyes molten gray. "Neither did I." Time paused. Then gently he reached out, fingers brushing a braid behind her ear, touch lingering on her cheek. She didn't flinch. Her breath shuddered. Her heart knew what her mind was too stunned to process. This night wasn't about business. It was about everything that had been waiting just beneath the surface, finally set free, cheek with the same reverence he'd shown her body the night before. "No," he said, his voice thick and low. "Don't run from this. Not yet. Not when everything inside me is screaming that last night wasn't just a moment." Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she searched his face, looking for the truth in his eyes. And she found it. Not lust, not guilt, not mourning after regret, but wonder. Like he was still marveling that she was real, that she'd let him in, that he had held her, kissed her, loved her in a way he didn't know he was capable of. "I don't know what this is," she whispered finally, her voice shaking with something more honest than fear. Hope. "But I know it wasn't just physical." Callum's mouth curved into something small, something fragile, a smile born not of triumph, but of surrender. "It was everything," he murmured, "and I'm not letting it vanish with the sunrise." Riley blinked back, the sudden sting in her eyes. She hadn't expected this. Not from him, not from the man whose every move in the office was measured, whose emotions were locked behind a fortress of control. But here he was, bare, not just in skin, but in soul. He pulled her gently into his arms again, letting her head rest against his chest, their heartbeats sinking in the quiet hush of morning. The sheet tangled between them, the scent of the night still lingering in the air, rich with memory and meaning. Outside the window, the horizon unfurled in golden blush, the kind of dawn that promised a new beginning. "I'm not asking for forever," Callum said quietly, his lips near her temple. "Just today, just honesty, just you." And in that moment, Riley knew. This wasn't a mistake. It was the start of something neither of them had planned, but both of them desperately needed. She nodded against his chest, her fingers curling into his side as she whispered, "Okay." Just one word. But it sealed something far deeper than any contract ever could. He brushed her cheek, so gently her eyes fluttered shut. "Last night wasn't a mistake," he murmured. "I don't want to pretend it didn't happen. And I don't want you to walk away like it meant nothing." Her eyes opened, wide and searching. For a heartbeat, she said nothing. She'd expected distance, awkward courtesy, not this, not tenderness, not him asking her to stay. "But we work together," she said quietly, clinging to logic even as her heart pulled away from it. "That hasn't changed," Callum replied, "but everything else has." She looked at him, trying to read his face, but all she saw was a man on the edge of something real, waiting for her to jump with him. "There's a resort," he said after a pause, voice steadier now. "Private. Quiet. I booked it just now." "For business?" she asked, still trying to stay grounded. "Officially, yes." A faint smile. "But truthfully, I just wasn't ready to let you go." Her heart stuttered. No one had ever said that to her, especially not a man like Callum Blackwell, controlled, distant, untouchable. "You want me to come with you?" "I want you to choose to," he said gently. "This doesn't have to be anything, or it can be everything. But I don't want last night to be all we have." Emotion caught in her throat. She nodded slowly. When he reached for her hand, she didn't pull away. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll come." Riley didn't know how Callum would react, not because she doubted his heart, but because he'd spent years hiding it behind walls of steel and strategy. Business was his shield. She was the only crack in it. And now this child, this miracle, would change everything. So she told him the only way she knew how. Quietly. One evening, after the office emptied, she stepped into his suite holding a small white envelope. Callum looked up from his laptop, his eyes softening. "Everything okay?" She nodded, crossing the room. Her hand trembled as she handed it over. "I didn't know how else to say it," she whispered, "so I wrote it down." Inside was a single folded sheet, 4 handwritten words. "We're going to be parents." For a moment, Callum didn't move. He just stared, as if decoding a truth his heart already knew, but his mind couldn't grasp. Then his gaze lifted to her, wide, stunned, breathless. "Riley," he whispered, his voice cracking. He stood, slow and reverent, like the moment might shatter if he moved too fast. And then he wrapped her in his arms, holding her as if the world could fall away and he wouldn't care. "You've just given me life," he breathed into her hair. "You don't even know what you've done to me." From that moment, Callum changed, first in quiet ways. His hand on her lower back when they walked, his schedule reshaped around hers, her cravings met with quiet devotion. When she cried, he held her. When she laughed, he beamed. When she needed, he was already there. But nothing prepared them for the 5-month scan. The room was calm. Then the doctor leaned forward, blinking in surprise. "Everything's okay," she said, then smiled wide. "More than okay. There are 4 heartbeats." Riley sat up, stunned. 4? "As in quadruplets?" the doctor confirmed. Callum's hand clenched around hers. The screen showed 4 fluttering stars, 4 tiny lives. For a second, he was frozen. Then he laughed, a loud, raw, joy-filled sound, and tears spilled down his cheeks. "You're giving me a universe," he said, cupping her face. "An entire galaxy." That night, he knelt beside her, kissed her belly, and promised their unborn children his heart, his life, and every day from now on. From that night, Callum wasn't just in love. He was transformed. But peace is fragile. 2 days later, the headlines broke. Abstinent CEO impregnates secretary with 4 babies. The world exploded. Paparazzi camped outside Blackwell Tower. Inside, whispers followed Riley's every step. She held her chin high, but the judgment stung. Callum, watching it all unfold, felt something unfamiliar. Rage. For the first time, he faced a battle not in a boardroom, but in defense of love. The next morning, he stood before the press on the marble steps of Blackwell Tower. Behind him, Riley appeared, glowing, radiant. Without hesitation, he took her hand. "She is not my secretary," he said. "She is the love of my life, the mother of my 4 children. She gave me more than business ever could. She gave me her heart, and now 4 more reasons to live." Gasps echoed, cameras flashed. But Callum was unmoved. "I love her. I will marry her. And to anyone who doubts it, you don't matter." The internet lit up. The narrative flipped. Callum Blackwell was no longer the untouchable CEO. He was a man in love. And that, it seemed, was his greatest power. That night, in their penthouse, Riley rested against him as he fed her strawberries and whispered baby names. "We don't even know their genders," she teased. "Doesn't matter," he said, kissing her forehead. "I already love them, every single one." And he meant it, because the world Callum once ruled with cold precision now spun around one thing only. Riley Monroe and the 4 tiny heartbeats that changed everything. Wrapped in hope and trembling sincerity, Callum took a steady breath. "Riley," he began, voice low, "when I first saw you on that jet, I never imagined this. I thought I was untouchable, frozen. But you gave me a heart." He paused, eyes searching hers, finding only unwavering trust. Slowly, he dropped to one knee, drawing a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside, a diamond shimmered like a captured star, but its brilliance paled beside the love in his gaze. "You gave me a heart," he whispered, voice thick. "Let me give you forever." Tears spilled freely down Riley's cheeks. Her fingers trembled as she cupped his face. The moment wrapped them in stillness. Only love remained. Callum smiled softly, brushing a lock of her braid behind her ear, his hand resting tenderly on her belly. "Marry me before our little ones arrive," he murmured. "Let me walk beside you, build a life with you." She nodded, speechless with emotion. Never had she imagined this dream would be hers. Him on one knee, asking to be her forever. Gently she closed the box, then pulled him up into a kiss that sealed every vow they hadn't spoken. Outside, stars witnessed what words could never capture. "You're my fairy tale, Riley," he breathed. Her smile lit the cabin like firelight. "Forever," she whispered. And as the jet soared into the night, the once untouchable CEO became simply a man in love, completely, utterly, irrevocably hers. Each name carried the weight of legacy: Cairo and Colton, strong and resolute, names that echoed heritage and quiet power. Amara and Issa, delicate as petals, were imbued with the grace and beauty of their mother. These weren't just names. They were declarations, vows, promises that each child would be fiercely loved, their lives wrapped in the unbreakable bond their parents had nurtured. For Callum, the world beyond the hospital walls faded into irrelevance. The empire he'd built, the boardrooms and deadlines, the cold calculus of power, all of it dissolved in the overwhelming gravity of fatherhood. In that room, holding his newborns, he understood. The greatest title he would ever hold wasn't CEO, it was Dad. He sat beside Riley, tears spilling freely, his voice trembling with awe as he whispered again and again, "They're perfect, just like their mother." Soft music played in the background, its melody a gentle echo of their joy, weaving warmth into the air, as if the universe itself had paused to honor their miracle. Riley, too, was changed. The woman once defined by her composure and strength now glowed with a maternal light that softened every edge. Her usually guarded eyes brimmed with unfiltered wonder and overflowing love. Exhaustion hung on her limbs, but it was eclipsed by a primal, radiant protectiveness, a love that had already etched itself deep into her soul. Around them, nurses and doctors moved softly, offering quiet congratulations and stealing glances at the mother whose strength had brought forth such beauty. Friends and family would later say the room felt sacred, suspended in time, where only love existed. Callum cradled each baby, memorizing every perfect detail, the curve of a cheek, the downy softness of hair, the gentle twitch of a sleeping mouth. Each touch was a silent vow to protect, to nurture, to love without limit. The day melted into a blur of tender moments, the whisper of blankets, the coo of newborns, the shared tears of two people forever changed. And somewhere within that blur, Callum found a deeper purpose, a reason beyond wealth, beyond titles. He promised Riley and himself that their children would grow up encircled by unwavering love, respect, and the safety only their parents could provide. That evening, as golden light streamed into the room, he held Riley's hand and watched their baby sleep. The weight of responsibility settled gently on his shoulders, not as a burden, but as a crown. His empire had made him powerful. These four tiny souls made him whole. And as night fell, with the sound of soft breathing all around him, he whispered a vow to the stars. I will always be here, for Riley, for Cairo, Colton, Amara, and Issa. In that sacred beginning, the cold shell of a CEO shattered. In its place stood a man reborn by love. Their quadruplet joy was more than a birth. It was the beginning of forever. Back home, everything changed. The sleek, minimalist penthouse, once a space of solitude and control, was transformed into a haven of warmth and laughter. Gone were the sharp lines of a lonely fortress. In their place came lullabies, baby giggles, and the ever-present rustle of love lived out loud. Callum, once defined by his detachment, stepped into fatherhood with relentless devotion. He refused to let Riley lift a finger. She had given him everything, and now it was his turn. He bathed the babies, changed diapers with surprising skill, and held them through sleepless nights. The hands that once closed billion-dollar deals now cradled fragile life with awestruck tenderness. Riley watched in quiet wonder, overwhelmed not by exhaustion, but by the love poured into every touch, every glance, every whisper from the man she once thought unreachable. Every gesture of his care was a love letter. At night, when the world went still, Callum turned his devotion to her. He knelt beside the bed, candlelight casting golden shadows as he massaged her tired feet, each stroke slow and reverent, as though worshiping the woman who had made him a father. You made me a man, he would whisper, voice thick with gratitude. You were always one, she would reply, eyes shimmering. You just needed love. It became their sacred exchange, spoken like prayer in the hush of night. He fed her by hand, kissed her skin with reverence, wrapped her in the soft fire of passion that had grown deeper, not dimmed, with time. Their love became its own sanctuary, slow, deliberate, consuming. Laughter echoed through their nights, unfiltered, spontaneous, blending joy with the shared burden of parenthood. Their intimacy was no longer about fire alone, but about comfort, safety, knowing, and being known. Callum learned her like a map, every mood, every breath. He became her anchor in stormy moments, her balm in anxious ones. And Riley blossomed. Under his care, her confidence surged. Motherhood didn't make her smaller, it made her mighty. Her vulnerability became her power. In Callum's eyes, she was unstoppable. Their nights turned into dawns filled with whispered dreams, soft kisses, and the kind of love that needed no language. The man who had once been steel and silence was now warmth and wonder. Friends who visited the penthouse were awestruck. It pulsed with life, with love, with the radiant energy of a family fully alive. Every night, Callum honored Riley, not as a duty, but as worship. She was his queen, his beginning, and his forever. And in those quiet hours wrapped in their love, they both knew. No challenge could ever fracture their bond. It was carved in fire, cooled in tears, and sealed by devotion. The transformation was undeniable. The CEO who had once clung to rules and distance now held his family like treasure. Their private island, a jewel surrounded by turquoise waters and swaying palms, wasn't a monument to wealth, but a sanctuary of love. Here, far from the chaos of the world, their children thrived. Every morning, sunlight poured through the villa's tall windows as Callum rocked the babies, his face alight with joy. The same man once feared for his coldness now radiated warmth that could melt stone. He kissed Riley at red lights, scribbled her love poems between meetings, left notes tucked in pockets. Reminders that she was still his muse, his miracle. Riley, once a secretary caught in a whirlwind romance, now stood as a queen in her own right, her grace undeniable, her heart the soul of their home. Together they navigated the chaos and magic of parenthood, never losing the spark that first bound them. Their children were each a piece of their love story made flesh. Cairo and Colton, bold and curious with Callum's silver eyes. Amara and Issa, soft and luminous with Riley's glowing warmth. Callum was never too proud to change diapers or dance in the moonlight just to make them laugh. They celebrated birthdays under stars, shared meals filled with joy, and created a home not just of luxury, but of soul. Yet even amid the splendor, it was the quiet love that defined them. The way Callum looked at Riley with reverence, the way their hands always found each other, the way their hearts beat in sync. His was a journey that defied logic. A man once abstinent and detached, now brought to life by the very thing he once feared, love. And everyone saw it. The awe in his voice when he spoke of her. The way his entire being bent toward the woman who had transformed him. One night with her, he would often say, eyes distant with memory, and I finally understood what it means to live. Their story became legend, not because of money or power, but because it was true, real. A story of hearts healed, souls awakened, and love made manifest. From a mistaken meeting on a jet to the birth of quadruplets and a home filled with laughter, Callum and Riley proved that love, when pure, fierce, and unrelenting, could rewrite even the coldest of fates. And as the sun dipped below the horizon each night, casting amber light over their island, they would sit hand in hand, the sound of their children's laughter in the distance, knowing with absolute certainty that the life they had built was their greatest legacy. Love had made them eternal.